It's no secret here on this channel that I love Halo. It is a series that has been a part of my life for almost 20 years now. With the series nearing its 20th anniversary, I feel like it is time to give the game that started it all a review that it rightfully deserves. This has been a game that I've wanted to discuss on this channel for quite some time, as it is a game that is near and dear to me, more than any other game I can think of. With that being said, let's talk about a game that not only started an iconic franchise, but changed the gaming world forever. During the early to mid-late 90s, an indie studio known as Bungie released a trilogy of first-person shooters. This series was known as Marathon. These games played similar to id Software's Wolfenstein and Doom series, but what made this franchise different from its competitors was Bungie's attention to detail when it came to its story and world building, and presented it in a way that was unique for its time. Many of the ideas and concepts from Marathon would be used in Halo with some slight modifications. In 1997, Bungie began developing a brand new science fiction RTS based game that had a unique physics engine. However, this game wouldn't come to light, and the idea was changed from an RTS game to a third-person shooter, which would be revealed at a Macworld Expo in 1999. The trailer showed a cybernetic soldier in an open world environment with unique looking architecture, vehicles and aliens. This demo eventually revealed the game to be known as Halo. Bungie originally developed their games primarily for Mac PCs, but at some point in time, Bungie would be bought out by Microsoft, tasked with creating a killer app for their upcoming console, which was the Xbox. This caused issues within Bungie's studio, as they had to revise the game more into a first-person shooter and release it on tech that they had no experience with. Halo would be shown at E3 2000 with a completely new look, though many of the vehicles and aliens only had slightly modified alterations. Unfortunately, Halo ran through even more development troubles, and at the time, Bungie only had a certain amount of time to release the game for a new console. It's no secret that game development is a challenging task, but Halo as a series has been known to be difficult to work on because of how advanced the games were and how overly ambitious Bungie's ideas were, leading to many concepts and ideas ultimately getting scrapped. On November 15th, 2001, Halo Combat Evolved was released alongside Microsoft's newly launched console. The game grew to immense popularity, selling millions and ultimately kickstarting it into the franchise we know and love to this very day, and as well as revolutionize shooters on consoles. With that being said, let's take a look at the story. We open our journey in deep space. A ship known as the Pillar of Autumn appears on screen. We are then introduced to two of our main supporting characters, Captain Keyes and an AI assistant known as Cortana. Humanity has long been at war with an alien army known as the Covenant. Keyes initiates a combat alert, ordering everyone to ready for an impending attack on the ship.
And Cortana, let's give our old friends a warm welcome.
I've already begun.
Somewhere within the ship, a super soldier known as the Master Chief awakens from cryosleep and is put into a short tutorial which allows the player to get accustomed to the game's shield recharge system. Unfortunately for Chief, the Covenant attack and Chief makes his way to meet the Captain. With the ship sustaining damage from the ongoing attack, the Captain plans to land the ship on the ring-like object in order to destroy the ship so that the Covenant doesn't obtain vital information.
Which is where you come in, Chief. Get Cortana off this ship. Keep her safe from the enemy. If they capture her, they'll learn everything. Force deployment, weapons research, Earth.
I understand.
With no time to waste, Chief finds an escape pod with other Marines and proceeds to land on the ring-like planet, watching as the Autumn plummets overhead onto the ring. The pod crashes, killing everyone inside except for the Chief. After evading a search party, Chief finds a small group of surviving Marines from the crash and defends their location until a pickup arrives. Chief defeats oncoming Covenant and sees the survivors secure themselves with Foehammer, a pilot of a UNSC Pelican. Chief sees a group of escape pods entering the atmosphere, and so he, Cortana and a few Marines journey to rescue the remaining survivors. Chief successfully secures all 3 remaining groups, and he learns that the captain survived the crash but has now been captured by Covenant forces. And Chief and a large group of Marines plan a rescue mission on the Covenant ship known as the Truth and Reconciliation. Chief and the Marines battle their way to the ship's gravity lift. They search the ship successfully and find the keys. They search the ship and successfully find Captain Keyes.
Coming here was reckless. You two know better than this. Thanks.
It's here where we finally get some info about this strange ring world. The ring is called Halo, a weapon of mass destruction on a galactic scale. Yeah, that's right. Move the fuck over, Death Star. This shit can destroy galaxies. Moving on, Keyes fear that the Covenant plan on using Halo to destroy humanity. It is then when Keyes gives the Chief a new mission. Find Halo's control center and stop the Covenant from activating Halo. The group then escape the ship and head off to find the control center. The next day, Cortana tells Chief that something called the Silent Cartographer, a map room, will lead them to Halo's control room. They find that the control room is buried miles deep underground. Foehammer takes Chief underground, and after exploring ancient hallways and battling Covenant forces, Chief and Cortana finally locate the control room. Chief inserts Cortana into the main console, where she learns vast amounts of information, leading her to be excited and thrilled, but the excitement is short-lived when she learns that the Covenant had found something that is just as ancient as the ring itself. Cortana demands Chief to find Keyes, as he decided to take a small group of Marines by himself, completely unaware of this newly discovered secret. Foehammer takes Chief to where the captain and the few Marines were last located. But something is terribly wrong. The Covenant are acting sporadic, frightened, as if they do not wish to engage you, only to run for their lives. A cold and unwelcoming atmosphere takes over as Chief descends into the lower level of a secret facility. Everything is quiet. Covenant weaponry is seen lying all about the floor. Chief then discovers dead Covenant and a terrified Marine that confuses Chief for something else, something that is not Covenant, and shoots at the Chief.
Stay back! Stay back! You're not turning me into one of those things! I'll blow your brains out! Get away from me!
Moments after Chief puts down the scared Marine, he stumbles across a blood-soaked floor and finds a door, only to find a dead Marine as he opens it. Chief finds a helmet from a dead Marine and finds a playback recording of Keyes and the Marines discovering something horrifying. After Chief learns the fate of the group, he's then attacked by organisms capable of resurrecting the dead. Chief narrowly escapes the facility and finds a group of Marines that agree to escape together with Foehammer, asking them to meet near a spire. The Chief makes his way, but before he can be overrun by this new threat, a floating machine who calls himself 343 Guilty Spark appears.
Greetings. I am the monitor of Installation 04. I am 343 Guilty Spark.
He tells the Chief that the Covenant has released this new threat, the Flood, a parasitic organism capable of destroying all life in the galaxy. Spark takes Chief to the library to retrieve the activation index, a key that can activate Halo. Chief finds the object and is transported back to the control room to insert the index and destroy the Flood once and for all. But before he can do so, however, Chief is interrupted by a furious Cortana and tells him that Halo doesn't just destroy Flood, the Flood can never be fully destroyed. It can only be suppressed, and that is by destroying its food source, all living life in the galaxy. Spark has ultimately tricked Chief into nearly activating the ring, which would have killed everyone. Spark then betrays the Chief and will use brute force to stop the flood, even if it means killing all life. Cortana plans in using the Pillar of Autumn as a way to destroy Halo by overriding its shield cores. Doing so would create a blast so powerful it could destroy the ring. Cortana asks Chief to destroy 3 generators to buy some more time. After destroying them all, Cortana says that they need to retrieve the Captain's neural implants to access all of the Autumn's controls, including the ship's engine cores. Unfortunately, they learn that the Captain has been turned into a giant mass of flood, and that there is no way of saving him. There is a bit more information about Keyes' final moment, but I'll discuss that near the end of this segment. Chief puts the Captain out of his misery and retrieves the neural implant and heads off to find the Autumn. Chief and Cortana find the crashed ship and they make their way to the bridge. Cortana attempts to arm the engine cores but is interrupted by 343 Guilty Spark, who is searching the ship for information. This leaves Chief with no choice but to destroy the engine cores with a well-placed grenade. Cortana contacts Foehammer to arrange a pickup, but Foehammer is unfortunately killed by Covenant Banshees. Cortana then says that one remaining ship is in the docking bay. Chief and Cortana make their way to the ship and quickly escape the blast. As the ship enters space, Chief and Cortana watch as Halo is finally destroyed. Though many have fallen and the day is seemingly saved, Chief tells Cortana that this isn't the end and we're just getting started.
Halo. It's finished.
No. I think we're just getting started.
So with the story over, what do I think of it and how does it hold up? Overall, if I was to be brutally honest, if you look at the story this way, the storytelling itself is very easy and basic. It's a story that isn't going to break any new ground, but it doesn't need to because it's a new entry in a series. What makes the story memorable is its presentation and mystery. We've seen stories of humanity fighting aliens and discovering an ancient civilization, but Halo had the smart idea by adding a tone of mystery behind Halo's origins and ultimate purpose. Character-wise, each character serves the purpose, but if you were to ask me, the standout character personally is Cortana. She's sassy, but also she's an intellectual. She's also funny as well, which is something Bungie does well with its characters. The Marines, whilst not the main characters, have their own unique personalities thanks to the performances and writing. Normally most games tend to not inject likeable personalities in side characters, not to say they don't exist, but Halo's side characters stand out from every other FPS because of how likeable the Marines are. When a bunch of them die during combat after spending a good amount of time with them, you do genuinely feel sorry for them despite them respawning in the next level. The character of Sergeant Johnson is a perfect example of this.
Once again, it is our job to finish what the Flyboys started. We are leaving this ship platoon and engaging the Covenant on solid ground. When we meet the enemy, we will rip their skulls from their spines and toss them away laughing. Am I right, Marines? Sir, yes, sir! Damn right I am.
The Master Chief himself doesn't have much character since he's really more of a vessel for the player to inhabit. Not that he isn't cool, the dude is one of the most iconic characters in video game history after all, but for his first appearance, he's just there for the player to control and to react to everything around him, which is honestly perfectly fine. I guess my least favourite character in the game would have to be Captain Keyes. It's not that his character is bad, it's the fact that he pretty much gets dropped off from the story for a while, and if you were to play this game first time, you'll find that his eventual death, whilst shocking, doesn't have any emotional impact. This is when the terminals come into play. When Combat Evolved had its 10-year anniversary, a re-release was announced with overhauled graphics and music, but one of the newer additions were the terminals, that contained information that fleshed out the universe in greater detail. In the mission where you find Keyes dead, a terminal about his last moments can be found. This terminal gives much greater closure to his death, detailing the brutal torture he experienced with the Flood. The Flood was searching and erasing certain memories from Keyes in order to find a large food source, and with Earth being humanity's biggest secret, Keyes allowed all of his personal memories, including those of his daughter, to be erased in order to keep Earth's location away from the flood. It's a brutal and heartbreaking piece of storytelling of a man slowly losing his humanity. So that gives not only more context to his death, but allowed us to see more of his character and what he was willing to sacrifice to save humanity. Overall, Halo has a basic but memorable story with great mystery, presentation, with Cortana and the Marines being the best characters in the game. It's not perfect, but it serves its purpose by introducing this universe to the player, and that is more than enough for me. With that being said, let's also take a look at the gameplay. What made Halo a respected game within the FPS genre was that it differed from the current FPS conventions of the time, whilst adding new ways for the player to experience and experiment with its weapons and vehicle combat. Halo plays like a smooth FPS that you expect from this genre. However, there are multiple layers for the player to take advantage of. Firstly, the biggest change was the 2-weapon limit. Whereas other games like Doom or Duke Nukem allowed the player to hold multiple weapons at once, you only have 2, which means you will need to incorporate a different strategy when in combat. Each weapon and vehicle in the game has its own unique purpose and features. For example, the plasma pistol released a deadly charge that will instantly disable the shields from elite soldiers or even yourself, and can even destroy sentinels instantly. The Needler can cause enemies to explode when a certain amount of spikes are struck on the enemy. The Magnum is an insanely powerful pistol, yet it has a scope that allows you to pick off enemies from a safe distance. You do of course have your standard shotguns, assault rifles and sniper rifles, and even a rocket launcher, but each of these weapons pack a unique punch that no other FPS had at the time. Like most of the human weapons, the Covenant Needler requires ammo, but the Covenant plasma pistol and rifle run on batteries, meaning you will need to replace the entire weapon once it runs out. The standard human grenade acts similar, but the difference with the plasma grenade is that it has the ability to stick to enemies, allowing them to panic and run directly towards a group, resulting in multiple enemies being eliminated. This is what made Halo's weapon sandbox the most diverse and unique weapon sandbox seen in a first-person shooter. Levels are huge and expansive. Traversing the environment and uncovering Halo's mysteries is why many of the levels have struck chords with many people for many years. The second level of the game, known as Halo, particular, is a highlight. When searching for the crashed escape pods, you don't find them in a linear fashion. There are multiple routes you can explore to get each individual pod. Most games back then had you heading towards a strict path, like a roller coaster for example. Though Combat Evolved does have linear sections, a few of them are structured in a way where you'll never play it the same way twice. That also goes for the game's AI. Halo's AI was way ahead of its time and still impressive even by today. Because of how the AI reacts, you will have a different experience with each playthrough. The game's flow of combat is something Bungie were masters of and continue to expand the combat's flow with each installment. If I was to criticise Halo's gameplay however, things like jumping can feel rather floaty, which is something Bungie would fix in later installments, but I'm not so bothered by this since it can allow for me to get more accurate shots whilst in mid-air. The vehicles in the game are some of the most fun you'll have in a video game. Like the weapons, each vehicle has their own unique feature. The UNSC Warthog has a giant turret that can shred through opposition, whilst the passenger can fire their respected weapon whilst you drive. The Covenant Ghost is a quick but effective vehicle, and the Banshee, which is a vehicle that can fly, has an alternate fire mode releasing an explosive ball of plasma with a large radius. And finally, the tank has a minigun that you can fire whilst driving, and the tank itself can hold up to 4 passengers. Overall, the vehicles in this game are very fun to use and the highlight of the experience. The difficulty of the game is varied and challenging, with Legendary being the highest difficulty. It's no secret that if you finish any game on Legendary, you easily have the bigger balls than anyone else because Legendary difficulty, whilst balanced, is extremely tough but satisfying once you finish the game. Heroic difficulty is less challenging, but that doesn't mean you'll breeze through the game. Enemies will still take you down very quickly if you don't use effective strategy. Speaking of the enemy itself has their own unique classes and species. Covenant grunts are small, easily startled creatures on their own and will cower when you take out a leader, but in packs they can easily kill you if you get swarmed. The jackals are slightly more aggressive and come equipped with a shield that deflects oncoming bullets. This means you will need to think about how you will encounter these guys, and once you do, you can take them down with relative ease. It's the elites you need to watch out for. Elites are essentially your equal. They have a shield that is tough and are a challenge to fight against even without the shield. Since they are more aggressive, given the opportunity, they will melee attack you, which can cause a huge loss in shielding for you, so be careful when confronting them. Sticking them with a plasma grenade is a quicker way of dealing with them, but they'll explode in a fit of rage and charge at you before they explode. And finally, for the last Covenant species, there's the Hunters. These guys have tough armour and cannot be killed through conventional means. You'll need to get behind them and shoot them in the back. Using the Magnum will result in an instant kill. Out in the opens, these guys aren't that tough, but in small corridors they can be a huge problem, so think about your combat strategy and you will succeed. That pretty much wraps up the Covenant, a challenging and varied adversary that have their own unique set of skills, aggression and personality, but they're not the only enemies you'll be fighting. The Flood is a different beast altogether. Lore-wise, these guys are scary and a force to be reckoned with. In gameplay, however, well, that's where things start to fall apart. Aside from just being your typical zombies in space, there's nothing really unique about them in combat. Sure, they're more aggressive and can jump higher, but they're pretty much all the same aside from two exceptions. Flood infection forms are small and quick, but can easily be defeated with a shotgun or assault rifle. One or two don't provide any challenge, but when there's a swarm of these things, that's when things can get more hectic. Flood carrier forms might not look much, they're slow and fat, making them an easy target, but if you get close enough they'll fall to the ground and explode, releasing multiple infection forms. It's not the infection swarms that you'll need to worry about, it's the detonation from the carrier itself. Flood combat forms are fast and tough, making them almost, if not tougher than the elites. But much like any form of the undead, a grenade or shotgun to the face will take out these guys with no problem. So why do I find them such a mixed bag? Well, despite having an awesome introduction, that introduction is quickly ruined because of the very next level, the library, which in my opinion is the worst level in the entire trilogy. This level has become so infamous in the franchise for being a repetitive bore with frustrating level design that goes on way longer than it should. This level dampened some of the game's enjoyment for me, and that's not me saying that the upcoming levels are bad, they're not. It's because this level will piss you off so much it will leave a bad taste in your mouth. And it's not just the level design, it's the fucking rocket flood. For whatever reason, Bungie decided that giving rocket launchers to the least fun enemy was a good idea. It feels so cheap and ruins the excellent flow of the gameplay that has been established throughout. And the last faction you'll be fighting in the game is the Sentinels. There's really not much to them, they're just floating robots with lasers, and the only quicker way to take them out is with the plasma pistol. Now the co-op feature for Halo was something that became a long-lasting feature until Halo 5. There's no changes to the gameplay of a co-op partner, it just means that this time you can experience Halo with a friend or family. This feature alone is what made me a fan of the series because I was too young to play the campaign by myself, so I spent most of my years playing this game with relatives, and there's nothing better than playing a wonderful game with your favourite people. And that pretty much wraps up Halo's gameplay. Even after 20 years, this game's gameplay has aged like fine wine. The difficulty is nicely balanced, the enemies are a blast to fight aside from a few bad eggs, and the co-op experience was a wonderful addition to the game that people still play to this very day. Now Halo does include a multiplayer component. I'll say this much, I'm not an expert on the deeper workings of multiplayer, so I won't go into it as much, but what we do have was super fun. The component has your standard team deathmatch, capture the flag, But there's also King of the Hill, which is my favourite mode since you'll need to secure a specific location until it moves to another spot on the map. Oddball requires you to hold a skull for as long as possible without getting killed in order to win. The multiplayer for Combat Evolved is loved by many, but it was Halo 2 and 3's multiplayer that are always talked about. However, if it wasn't for the multiplayer in CE, we wouldn't have Red vs Blue, which was a web series and a parody of the Halo series. This show was created using the multiplayer's variety of maps. The show became very popular and ultimately successful, spawning an entire franchise that even Microsoft became aware of. It was in the community where Halo's multiplayer became recognisable, and even though it's not my favourite iteration, it's still a fun ride regardless, and I highly recommend you try it out. Just keep in mind that it's not a very well balanced multiplayer. I'm no expert in describing how music is crafted, but I can tell you this: Halo's soundtrack is the best soundtrack, not just in video games, but ever. Martin O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore crafted a soundtrack that is unlike anything you've heard in a video game. The main theme has become an iconic track in video games. Sure, you have the theme of Super Mario, Sonic, and Doom, but Halo's theme, in my opinion, represents the series' greatness. There's plenty of tracks that are exciting, suspenseful, and mysterious, and even magical to some extent. If you want to know how popular Halo's music really was, there are thousands of remixes and remakes of the game's score by talented people who have a strong passion for the soundtrack. I myself own the entire trilogy soundtrack for a very good reason. I've purchased the soundtrack on my phone to take with me wherever I go because it's that solid. Even on its own, the score can still work even if you know nothing about the series. Not only that, but the music continued to improve with each game. The soundtrack has stuck with me ever since I was young as 4 years old, and if that isn't telling enough, then I don't know what is. A huge thank you to Marty and Michael for creating a soundtrack that felt otherworldly and light years ahead of its time. Halo is one of the greatest games ever. It has a few problems of course, but no game is perfect. Halo 2 is a game that comes close to perfection in my eyes, but Halo still is an amazing game. This one game spawned an entire franchise that has become the Star Wars equivalent of video games, and even with some of the games not coming close to being as good as this game, the franchise became popular because it struck chords with people. It created friendships and a strong community, full of talented and creative people, some of which had become good friends with. I think people knew they were in for something special when they saw the original loading screen. It was simplistic, but its music and atmosphere set the tone for the journey ahead. It represented Halo in its purest form. So over the past several months, I've been debating on something that I thought I wouldn't be able to accomplish, but I finally made the decision. Over the next coming weeks, I will be reviewing all of the Halo games that were developed by Bungie in the celebration for the series' 20th anniversary. It's an ambitious idea, but it's one I couldn't be more excited to pull off. We've got a long road ahead, but we've got something special awaiting, and I hope for those of you watching, you'll stick around to see what's in store. So join me next time as we look at my personal favourite game in the franchise, the one that changed online multiplayer, a game that pushed the studio to its breaking point, the one and only Halo 2.
Oh no! At my birthday dinner, I promised MJ I would meet her this evening. I gotta hurry.
On my birthday dinner, I promised MJ I'd meet her this evening.
I'll go meet MJ, guys.
Fuck MJ, she hasn't even got big tits.
Ginger slag.
Hey guys, Spider-Man flying in. This is a bad idea.
I can't fucking hear anything besides Spider-Man beating the shit out of people. That's such a great
Shacks. I just got an achievement for him. Right. I think one of them's got a gun.
Aruka, when the credits are done in the video, please put like a like this shit at the
Oh yeah, well fuck